الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Welcome, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to all of you. Thank you all for taking time out of your Tuesday evening to join us for another episode of the Reverts Roundtable. And the title of our lecture is Abuse in the Muslim Community, the Link to Mental Health. And this lecture is a follow-up to our last roundtable discussion. And it was a pretty fruitful discussion. A lot of people chimed in, and it was clear implicitly and explicitly that the group wanted to talk more about this, wanted to hear more discussions along these lines. A lot of people had experienced some form of abuse or trauma within the Muslim community, and it's something that the group wanted to explore in more detail. And I too am very interested in this topic for some of the reasons which will become clear as we get into our discussion today. So as we said, this lecture is a follow-up. And tonight what we're going to look at, or we're going to try to explore, what drives that abuse. And we're not saying that we're going to talk about every single driver of the abuse, but specifically we're going to talk about the link between, we're going to talk about one of those drivers, specifically the link between the abuse that occurs in Muslim community settings and personality disorders which affect some of the community's members. So the link between the abuse that we're seeing and personality disorders that some people may be afflicted with within the Muslim community. So let me begin with a disclaimer. Although I will be referencing some clinical terms, I'll be referencing some clinical terms, this lecture is not a clinical academic lecture. I am not an expert on human psychology, nor do I claim to be an expert on personality disorders. But in our religion, we are told to فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, consult the people of knowledge if you don't know. And this certainly includes consulting the experts of various secular sciences and disciplines when necessary and appropriate. In an effort to better understand and deal with the abusive situations we face in our communities, consulting the studies of expert students of human psychology and personality and their effects on human behavior generally, and on behavior in relationships specifically, is, in my opinion, warranted. And that is why I've approached this topic in this way this evening. Now, what's the motivation for this topic? So, why this topic? And why the attempt to link or understand abuse in light of mental health, and more specifically, personality disorders? So what I'll say to that, brothers and sisters, is that I personally, since becoming a Muslim and working closely with Muslims in community settings, I've experienced repeated abuse of varying degrees. I have also interacted with and been consulted by countless brothers and sisters who have told me of their experiences with this abuse, meted out by other Muslims in a community setting. And these abusive situations range from actual physical abuse. I'm talking about people being struck, people being spit on, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, financial abuse, professional, and other forms. And it is our nature as humans, when anything distasteful happens, even things we have reason to expect to occur, our nature is to ask why. Even if we expected the outcome, we still ask why. And so when I experienced abuse, I certainly asked why and proceeded to try to make sense of the abuse. And as I replayed the incident and used the clues provided by the replay, many times my investigation, my quest for the answer to the question why, led me to conclude the person or people involved were simply evil or mean-spirited or heartless. It's almost like you're following a path, and the path is dotted with what? With clues, with breadcrumbs, or something that's supposed to lead you to a certain place. And you follow those clues as you replay the abuse in your mind, well, this happened, the person said this, and the person did that, and you keep following and following to try to see, okay, well, what was their motive? What caused it? What brought it on? And you come to a door that says that's written on the face of it, the person is evil. And me, being a religious idealist, a person who believes in the inherent goodness in people, that people are who they say they are, and they are as they present themselves to be, I would always reject this conclusion. I would get to that door that says this person is evil, this person is just mean-spirited, they're just heartless, they're just calloused, and I would just reject that outright. I would say these people are not evil. I would say I have missed or misinterpreted something along the way, misread the clues, and consequently drawn the wrong conclusion. Or I would do what a lot of us do. I would just blame myself. It was something I did. It was something I said. You know, I'm the one who brought this on myself. A lot of us do this. We blame ourselves when we're the ones actually who have been victimized. We're the actual victims of abuse. So, like I said, but this keeps reoccurring. And you keep trying to figure out why, because it's just human nature to try to figure out why. And ultimately, now after years and years of reflection and recent experience with abuse, years and years of reflection on this process, and this process playing out over and over again, and years of just experiencing abuse in various degrees again, and reflecting on it each time, I've come to realize a few things. Number one, I have been naive. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not saying that to shame myself. I don't think there's any shame in being a religious idealist. I don't think there's any shame in believing in the inherent goodness in people. I don't think there's any shame in that. I'm not ashamed of that. But I do have to acknowledge that there's a difference between what is ideal and what is real. And things are often not as we wish they were, or not as they are in the books. That sometimes reality is inconsistent with what? With what is ideal. And so I have been naive to think, yeah, all those people were good. None of them were evil. None of them had malicious intent. I was always at fault. I was naive to think like that. And I've accepted that. Number two, some people are evil and have sociopathic or psychopathic tendencies. They are human predators. They lack empathy, and and to deny this would be to deny the Quran itself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Shayateen al-ins, Shayateen al-insi wal-jinn. Shayateen al-jinni wal-ins. He says, devils from among mankind and jinn kind. Not just jinn kind, but they're actually shayateen who are among men. He also says, min al-jinnati wal-nas. At the end of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the people who they are evil and they make evil suggestions. And he says, min al-jinnati wal-nas. From among mankind and from among jinn kind. So there are some people in the world that are evil. And some of those people just might happen to be what? Muslims. Number three. The third thing that I realized is that most people are not evil. But they may be afflicted with a disorder that prompts them, in some cases uncontrollably, to do evil things. And this is where the link between abuse and undiagnosed or untreated personality disorders comes in. This is why I felt the need, I really wanted to explore this and study this and read about this extensively, and the link between this and what we're seeing and experiencing of abuse. So now, clarification of purpose. What can we benefit from a discussion like this one? What do we have to gain? Are we just going to say, yeah, some people do what they do because of personality disorders and go on about our business? What do we stand to gain from a discussion like this? Number one, understanding, brothers and sisters, is a coping mechanism. If we understand the root cause of some of what we experience, no matter how distasteful, it helps us to cope with it. We tend to handle bad things better when we know why. when we know why they happen and what has motivated them. And if you look, for example, even in the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is narrating the story of Al-Khidr and Musa, and Musa goes to Al-Khidr and he says, can I follow you? Ala an tu'allimni mimma ullimta rushda. Can I follow you that you might teach me some of the things that you know or you have been guided or given the knowledge of? And Al-Khidr, he responds to Moses saying, وَكَيْفَ تَصْبِرُ عَلَى مَا لَمْ تُحِطْ بِهِ خُبْرًا. He told him, first, you won't be able to be patient with me. You won't be able to walk with me and be patient and tolerate my behavior, the behavior that I'm going to exhibit. And how are you going to be patient with something that you have not been given the knowledge of? You haven't been given the why of it. You have no understanding of the why of it. As if to say that if you really understood why I do what I do, it would be more easy for you to what? To accept it, to tolerate it. And so that teaches us in a roundabout way, brothers and sisters, that knowing the why is a tremendous coping mechanism. And in our lives, we've experienced that. When somebody might do something to us and we don't realize why they do what they do. They may behave in a way. For example, you might go to work and a coworker might you might ask them, you might go into the cafeteria and say, is there any creamer left? And that person might go off on you. What am I, your maid? I'm just supposed to do inventory in here. You want to look for this creamer? Go look for the creamer. It's in the cabinet. Blah 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 blah. And you're like, whoa, what just happened here? And you're just like, wow, I don't know why this person. We always have great interactions. The person's always so pleasant. Why are they yelling and screaming in my face? And then when you find out that person lost a relative over the weekend, that person, one of their relatives passed away. That doesn't change the way the interaction made you feel, but because you understand why, now you're able to what? To accept it, to cope with it, to deal with it. And so this is one of the benefits of a discussion like this one. Another benefit is understanding is the first step toward meaningful solutions. We can't solve the problems we face without identifying the root cause. If we realize that this is a problem in our communities and it's driving some of the abusive situations that we're seeing, then we can what? We can move to address it. So number 3 of why this discussion is beneficial is because understanding encourages being a part of the solution instead of a part of the problem. And for example, if we understand that our own, and this is important too because we have to also look within, look inwards and not always look outwards. Oh yeah, this happened, this abusive situation happened to me because so-and-so suffers from X personality disorder or Y personality disorder. No, we need to look within, look inward. If we understand that our own undiagnosed or insufficiently addressed personality disorders are creating abusive situations, we are more likely to be moved to appropriately address them. If we really sit with ourselves, do that self-introspection, self-evaluation, introspection, self-inventory, and we say, hey, I'm demonstrating X characteristic, Y characteristic. I do have some of the history of trauma that could lead to certain personality disorders. Hey, maybe some of the conflict that I've been involved in, maybe that has something to do with what? Things that I haven't addressed, problems that I have, and I need to look inward and fix my own stuff, get my own self together, etc. But what I want to do, and I don't know if we'll be able to do it today, we may have to have a part B to this, but I wanted to look at the discussion from 2 perspectives. So in this discussion, we want to look at the link between community abuse and mental health from 2 perspectives. 1, is mental health as a driver or root cause of abuse? 2, the effects of abuse on the mental health of the abused. And this is important because a lot of people in Muslim communities where abuse is rampant, or where it's just existed, it's there. Whether it's rampant or not, it's there. A lot of them they themselves are having a mental health crisis because of the abuse that they're suffering, the abuse that they're forced to endure because they want to belong to a particular mosque or be a part of a particular community etc. But before we delve too deep, it's important for us to talk about two things. One, what is personality? And number two, what is personality disorders? So number one, personality is the combination of thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that make each one of us unique, make us who we are. According to experts, it is categorized by the following characteristics. So what is personality? What are the characteristics of personality? Number one, they say it forms during childhood. It forms during childhood. That basically, a lot of, we're going to talk about this too, a lot of what happens to us, the way we're raised, the way we're nurtured, or the absence of nurturing, trauma, experiences, a lot of those impact who we are, how we think, how we behave. Because the formative years for personality are the years of childhood. Number two, personality is informed by two things, basically informed by two things. The first one, genetics. That certain personality traits may be passed on by our parents, inherited genetically, inherited genes. So for example, a person's parents were extroverts, right? They were people who they were people, right? So the person himself or herself has this quality or personality of extroversion. Could be the opposite. The quality of what, shyness, inherited from the parents. Could be agreeableness, just get along with everybody. Candor. My parents were people, they were straight shooters, and I inherited this personality trait from them. I say it just as it is. I don't sugarcoat anything. I say it just like it is. I tell like it is. Candor. These are some examples. A person might get these types of personality traits from the genetics or the genes of their parents. Number two, it's informed by environment or experience. So certain personality traits are a result of our upbringing, how we were raised, events that occurred in our developmental years, trauma we may have experienced, unresolved issues and dysfunctional relationships with family members. For example, one of us may suffer from intense fear of being alone or abandoned. And that may be a consequence of an incident of abandonment that occurred in our childhood. Consequently, nowadays in our adult life, we find ourselves, when we get into a relationship, we're very possessive and controlling because we're afraid that person is going to leave. So we have to hold on to them. We have to, be possessive and controlling. Where are you going? Who are you going with? How long are you going to be gone? I don't want you to go there. I don't want you hanging out with that person. Because why? I'm afraid you'll leave. I'm afraid of abandonment. Why? Because I was abandoned as a child. That becomes a part of my personality because of an experience in childhood. Number three, it typically stays the same over time. We typically are who we are. These traits become baked in, cooked in. It's like, for example, you're formed like clay, and then you go into an oven, and then you are what you are. You're an ashtray, or you're a vase, or you're a paperweight, whatever it is, but you are what you are. But, number four, it can be influenced or affected or exacerbated by a number of factors, especially our emotional states or circumstances that trigger an emotional or physical response. Like, now we talked about personality. What's a personality disorder? A personality disorder is an unhealthy, underscore the word unhealthy, way of thinking, feeling, or believing. Number one. Number two, this unhealthy way of thinking, feeling, or believing deviates and differs significantly, underscore the word significantly, from what is expected according to societal or cultural norms. For example, normally, we expect people to have empathy, to be responsible, to accept, to be honest and truthful, to be who they say they are and not misrepresent themselves. We also do not expect people to be conniving, to size us up, look for an advantage and try to take advantage of us. We don't expect people to intentionally harm others, to sabotage them, or to derive pleasure from their misfortune. So when people behave outside of the way we expect them to behave, then that's called what? A personality disorder. This personality disorder it usually causes distress, fosters problems, and hinders normative function. And that doesn't mean that the person can't keep a job. They can't stay employed. It doesn't mean that necessarily. But it does mean that what? That things that normally people are able to do, like, for example, maintain a relationship, they struggle with that. Or to avoid conflict, diffuse conflict, minimize conflict, they're unable to do that. And last but not least, it lasts over time. It's not a passing thing. If a person gets angry, they get so angry that they throw things. And then they calm down. And this is something that you've never seen them done. They've never seen them do, known them for 10 years, never seen them do it before. Known them for another 10 years, never seen them do it again. We don't call that a personality disorder. But when a person does that all the time, and it lasts over time, then yeah, we call that what? A personality disorder. But now let's talk about some of the common effects of personality disorders. The single most common effect of personality disorders mentioned by experts, when you read the articles and the different works written by people who talk about personality disorders, one of the common themes is that those afflicted with them are increasingly predisposed to toxic, dysfunctional relationships. They find it difficult to get along with others and are prone to abuse, whether as victims or victimizers. Now, few things to consider now, as we bring it home to what? How that relates to the Muslim community. How the abuse in Muslim communities could be driven. We have to acknowledge the fact that it could be driven, or it's partially driven, by the existence of these undiagnosed or untreated personality disorders. Number one, it is estimated, brothers and sisters, that personality disorders affect about 9% of people living in the US. That's almost 1 out of 10. It stands to reason, therefore, that in communities comprising hundreds of parishioners, there could be several people with whom we interact who suffer from one personality disorder or multiple disorders. Number two, consider this. These personality disorders can affect anyone, and that includes imams, board members, prominent figures, and common mosque patrons. It can affect the people who just come there and pray 5 times a day. But it can also affect leadership, people in positions of authority and power. Number 3, one study done by the Mayo Clinic mentions that many people with personality disorders may not realize that they have one, because their way of thinking and behaving seems natural to them. They have normalized their behavior, and they blame others for the challenges they face in relationships and otherwise. It's always somebody else's fault. They've normalized their behavior. There's nothing wrong with me, so it has to be something wrong with them. Number 4, since personality disorders are often linked to childhood trauma, and Muslim communities are rife with examples of people who've experienced some trauma in childhood. Just think about it. One of the things that's common in our Muslim communities in America is the presence of, for example, refugees. This is very common. I've traveled all over the country, and I've seldom gone to a mosque where there weren't people living there who were refugees. Refugees of one of these conflicts, one of these war-torn countries, and they came here. For example, I've been in communities where there are people from Afghanistan, people from Bosnia, people from Syria, people from Somalia, people from different countries, and they're all refugees. And what does that mean? That means that many of them were in those countries in times, some of them in their childhood, and bombs were dropping all around them. People were being killed. They saw people die in some of the most horrific ways. Some of them suffered through hunger. Some of them suffered through, bitter cold and being exposed to the elements. Not being able to go to school for years on end. Not being able to find just a time where you could just be at peace. That's an example of a lot of trauma present, concentrated in Muslim communities, childhood trauma. But add to that, for example, the African American experience. And many of us who have converted to Islam many of us have experienced some form of childhood trauma, whether it be poverty, whether it be domestic abuse, whether it be alcoholism, whether it be drug abuse. These things happened either in some of us in our own households, and some of them may have happened in our communities, the communities in which we lived, and we were touched by it in some way, shape, or form. That's a lot of trauma concentrated in what? In a community that could do what? That could lend, or it stands to reason that people who are suffering from personality disorders are present in our communities. طيب ثم بعد ذلك number 5. If abuse in our communities is a frequent occurrence, or certain individuals are constantly involved in conflict or at the center of controversy, it stands to reason, brothers and sisters, that personality disorders are at least one possible contributing factor. We can't rule that out. We can't rule that out. We can't rule it out for ourselves, and we can't rule it out for others either. طيب ثم بعد ذلك I want to look at some of the practical examples of abuse which might be linked to personality disorders. And there were a few other things that I wanted to talk about today, but I don't think we'll get to those, because obviously we want to have an opportunity for discussion and close out early enough for people to get on with their lives to do other things. So I think I'm going to stop with this. I'm going to take this one, and then we have to look at abuse from the side. The link to mental health, or the effect of the mental health of those who've been abused. We have to look at that, and we also have to look at some possible solutions for the problem as it relates to what this particular driver, the driver of mental health or personality disorders. So those are things we might have to take in another session, but we'll close out with talking about some of the practical examples of abuse which might be linked to personality disorders. That basically we're seeing certain things, and we need to realize that the driver of some of that abuse that we're experiencing may be personality disorders. That may be what is at play. Okay, and then as we said, the benefit of that is, 1, it helps us cope. 2, it helps us strategize. 3, it helps us be a part of the solution as opposed to a part of the problem. So let's listen to these with those 3 objectives in mind. Those 3 things we want to have, those 3 objectives in mind as we listen to some of these practical examples, because we might be we might ourselves exhibit some of these qualities. We might be doing some of these things, and therefore we know that we have some work that we may need to do on our own selves. We also may be seeing it from others. We may be affected by it. We may be victimized by it, and therefore that helps us to as we said, cope and to strategize how we're gonna fix it. But that being said, I'll begin with the high conflict personality, or HCP. And this is a term used to describe individuals with multiple personality disorders. And I don't want to get into cluster A, cluster B, cluster C personality disorders, and which I don't want to get into that. Why? Because this is not a clinical study. I'm not teaching you necessarily about personality disorders in and of themselves, but rather the link between them and the abuse. So I'm not going to tell you these are all of the personality disorders that are considered to be related to HCP, but I just want you to pay attention to this high conflict personality, which is linked to multiple personality disorders, and how this person in the category kind of conducts themselves, how you can recognize them, and how some of these qualities exist in certain individuals who are at the center of controversy and conflict in our communities, and are the habitual abusers, if you will, in our communities. So that said, a person in this category has been described with the following traits, and there's an article on this if you want to look into it. It's an article published by the Psychological Care and Healing Center, and they have posted this article on their website, Psychological Care and Healing Center, and I believe the title of it is just that, high conflict personality disorder. I think that's what the title of it is. Al-Muhim, so they mention the traits, and they say they initiate and receive reward. They receive pleasure. They get a buzz from conflict with others. And they are usually at the center of whatever conflict is occurring. They appear to treat conflict as normal and expected in their interactions, to a point at which conflict becomes a defining aspect of their relationships. They normalize conflict, and when conflict occurs and other people are uncomfortable with it, they're very what? Comfortable with it. They're like, what's the big deal? They kind of like they're flippant about it. Like, okay, so what? There was a conflict. There was a shouting match. There was yelling. There was cursing. There was almost coming to blows. And what's the big deal? It happens. That's their attitude about conflict. It goes on to say they are adept at escalating conflict and at blaming others. They escalate the conflict and they're not at fault. Others are at fault. At the same time, they have great difficulty seeing things through the eyes of others, which means what? They lack empathy. They lack empathy. And I remember a situation where there was a heated exchange between a person in the mosque and other people in the mosque. And one of the sisters was crying because of something that was said to her, some harsh words that were said to her. And the person continued to be harsh and continued to say other harsh things, never apologized, and never showed any empathy for the emotion of that sister and her crying and her tears and being upset by something that was said to her. In fact, the person acknowledged that they had said it and didn't apologize, didn't take it back, etc. Then they are extremely reluctant to take responsibility in their lives or to accept blame when things go wrong. They are often referred to as chronic blamers. They tend to be emotional, aggressive, meaning they will yell and scream to get their point across or merely to intimidate. They are mistrustful, which means they think everyone is out to get them or replace them or take what they have, whether that's authority or a title or a position or a following. I'm afraid that more people will follow you than follow me. And they are controlling, meaning they seek a monopoly on decision making, even in matters that do not concern them. They easily see themselves as victims, and they are extremely resistant to acknowledging that they may have contributed, even in the smallest way, to making a situation difficult. They have little or no insight into their own behavior, which means they are lacking in self-awareness. And they are easily threatened by interpretations of behaviors that do not comport with their own world view. So this is this HCP type personality, right? High conflict personality has all these different qualities, and I'm sure these qualities frequently. I'm sorry. There's no doubt that these qualities frequently translate to abuse in the Muslim community setting. And if we reflect, we may all be able to cite personal examples of them. People we have encountered who exhibit these traits. I'm sure if many of us, if we reflect and say, yeah, I've encountered somebody like that. And that person was, not surprising, could have been somebody prominent, let alone a common worshiper, just somebody who comes 5 times a day, but they're what? They're always at the center of what? Controversy. I remember when I was living up north in the Northeast. There were certain people like this. There were certain characters. There were multiple characters in one mosque who exhibit a lot of these qualities. And one of them would get into physical altercations. I mean, physical. Forget about shouting matches and name calling. That happened from this person. But physical altercations, one of which involved the spitting in the face of a woman over daycare in the mosque. And so, yeah, there are people like this in our communities, and many of us, if we reflect, we've experienced that. We've seen it play out in front of us. And can we dismiss the idea that had anything to do with a personality disorder, an undiagnosed or untreated personality disorder? A person thinks they're normal, and they think that this behavior is normal. It's normal to spit in the face of a woman over daycare. Like, thumma dhalik, HCP is a general catch-all example. The one we just gave, high conflict personality, catch-all example. It encompasses a lot of different people, individuals, or even groups, if you will. But a more specific example is that of individuals who practice frequent Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude is a German term which basically means harm joy, which basically means they derive pleasure or amusement from the pain and suffering of others. And this personality disorder is sometimes coupled with a lust for shaming and shunning, especially performative shaming and shunning, which means shaming and shunning with no constructive purpose in mind for the one being shamed. So they shame a person, but they don't shame him because they mean something to do something constructive by shaming him. That basically I'm shaming him for his benefit. No, I'm just shaming him to humiliate him, shaming him for the sake of shaming him, right? But at the same time, they do seek personal gain, or personal gain is the principal motive of the shamer. The shamer himself, or the shunner, is shaming and or shunning, seeking from that shaming and shunning personal gain. That's his principal motive. These performative shamers establish shame networks and seek to achieve hegemonic power over individuals. How they think and what they accept as truth. Please pay attention to this example that I'm developing right now. These performative shamers establish shame networks and seek to achieve hegemonic power over individuals. They want to control how they think and what they accept as truth. They want, when they see something, these blind followers of the shamers and shunners, when they see something, these shamers and shunners, these performative shamers and shunners, who are doing it for show, they want those followers of theirs to turn to them to tell them what they're supposed to think about it. Whether or not they're supposed to accept it as true or not. That's what they want. These movements within the Muslim community are highly effective in preying on the sincere but weak-minded. You have people who they accept Islam, or they return to Islam after some time away from it, and they are sincere. They really want to do the right thing. They want to follow the truth, but they're weak-minded. They're not independent thinkers, and they're easily influenced by others. They prey on people like that and subject them to various forms of abuse. Because the performative shamers and shunners cloak their shaming in religious piety and righteous indignation. Because of this, their victims feel helpless to contradict them or call them out for their transgression. So even when the victims of the abuse of these shamers and shunners, these performative shamers and shunners, even when the victims of this recognize, hey, this is abuse. I'm being abused. They're afraid to call the shamers and shunners out for their abuse and their transgressions. Why? Because on the one hand, because they've cloaked what they do, the shaming and shunning that they do, they've cloaked it in the cloak of religion and piety. We're doing this for Allah's sake. We are the gatekeepers of righteousness and piety, the gatekeepers of truth. On the one hand, they feel that if they oppose these shamers in the name of religion, they will appear to others in the network to be opposing truth and virtue itself. If I go against them, if I oppose them, then the people in the network will say, you're opposing the truth itself. And on the other hand, they fear that they will share the same fate as others who have been unfairly shamed and shunned. And this tactic is used by followers of extremist groups. One example being those individuals who have hijacked the Salafi methodology and given it a bad name by concentrating solely on and erroneously applying some of the principles of methodology. They focus solely on certain principles and they erroneously apply those principles. Like ar-rad al-mukhalif, refuting those opponents who deserve refutation. This is a part of the Salafi manhaj, the Salafi methodology. But they focus on, and they make it as if it's the only part. and they apply it erroneously. They apply it to things that it's not supposed to be applied to. For example, the early Muslims did not refute the people who differed with them in matters in which difference of opinion are permitted, but they do. And also another example of one of those principles that they focus on solely and misapply is al-jarh, disparaging those who have entitled themselves to be disparaged, and a ta'dil, endorsing those worthy of endorsement. And so this is a type of abuse which in many cases is, again, at its root or its core, could be a personality disorder. A personality disorder where a person is driven by the desire to be in control, like narcissistic personality disorder. I want to be in control, I want to be in charge, I'm special. People should follow me, they should follow my lead. But I don't really have anything that makes me worthy of following. So what do? What I do is I become a performative shamer and shunner. And I become the person who starts to go on social media and point out the faults of others, magnify those faults, and tell people that that in order to be followers of the truth, they have to shun and shame this person. They have to disassociate themselves with the person, boycott the person, not listen to the person. They have to call him names. And they seek to get what? They seek to build their credibility and reputations through what? Through these refutations, these unjust refutations. Not to say that not some of them might be just, but in many cases, they're unjust. And so this is another example of the type of abuse we see, and these people form these networks of sincere but weak-minded followers who feel trapped. We have to continue to support them and not oppose them, because if we oppose them, the way that they've set up the network and the way that they have set up the system is that if you oppose us, you're opposing truth itself. And on the other hand, if you oppose us, then we'll shame and shun you like we shamed and shunned those other people, even though it might not be fair. So these are two examples, brothers and sisters. It is now 7:42, and I would like to leave some time for some discussion and some comments and maybe some queries. And so there's more to discuss on this topic, perhaps with Zahida's permission and your permission, obviously. We may continue it when we meet again next time. With that, though, I will end my remarks and offer you the opportunity to say whatever you may want to say on the topic. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.
Alhamdulillah, Jazakallah Khan. There were some comments in the back channel, but if there's anyone in the audience who would like to come up, please raise your hand and we'll bring it to the stage, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Abu Jassa. How are you?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm doing good, alhamdulillah. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, doing well, mashallah.
Alhamdulillah. So you can hear me clearly. I'm traveling, so I'm always fearful of getting on the mic while I'm moving.
Yes, we can hear you clear. Go ahead.
Okay, alhamdulillah. I just wanted to contribute a very small, this may or may not be true, but what I feel like when you're dealing with these individuals, you know how they say weed is a gateway drug, and whether that's true or not, I think the analogy can be understood that slander and backbite is the gateway drug, the gateway act for these people. So if you tolerate that type of behavior, they sucking you in. So I just wanted to share that. Always stand firm against slander and backbite, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khairan, Jazakallah khairan.
Assalamu alaikum, Umaisha. How are you?
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I just wanted to thank the brother for bringing bringing this up. You don't ever hear this in any masjid or any rooms or anything. And I mean, you done took me way back to the 90s. I don't know. My goodness, and I'm saying in my head, I can name a whole bunch of these people. I remember some of these brothers' wives used to call my house when they couldn't get no food. I mean, I just it just takes me way back, and I just think about all the folks that used to know, and then the last person that I was married to, who was connected to so many of those brothers. I remember hearing their voices. He would put them on loudspeaker, and say he can ask them questions, but I just feel compelled to ask him anything because some of the stuff I knew from way back in the day. But it used to amaze me how they used to I'm thinking how people used to treat them. They used to treat them like superstars, like these people were
Subhanallah.
infallible and things like that. I'm like, these sinful wolf
Allah.
they remind me of a bunch of wolves and foxes. I'm from Chicago, so I'm looking like, okay, this is Islam. Alhamdulillah, we're gifted with this. But shoot, looking at these people, some of these brothers that was in positions of authority, I'm like, shoot, they remind me of folks I used to see on the streets. I mean, just they take your sincerity and just run straight to the moon with it. Astaghfirullah. But it's like, you have to ask them, like, man, do these people really believe? Or is this just a game for them? You know, that's the question I used to have in my mind. Like, do they really believe? And then, subhanAllah, when you hear of some of the afflictions that have hit them in years later, I'm like, ooh, Allahu Akbar. May Allah save us from that. And me, a lot of them have been punished and
Amen.
tested with stuff that I would never, ever want to be tested with. So may Allah protect us all and keep our hearts sincere on this deen and never allow us to leave even for a blink of an eye. I feel sorry for those people. It's like, man, if you could just talk to the people, but a lot of them have left because a lot of these people have abused them or made these fake fatwas, not giving a whole story about some things. Well, the sheikh said this, and then you find out after the fact that he never knew the whole thing. He only got a clip of this or a clip of that, and then so many people have been abused in that way. Allah Mustaan, may Allah help us and forgive us and guide us and rectify our affairs. I mean.
Amin ya Rabbil Alamin.
Assalamu alaikum, brother Abu Fareed.
Wa alaikum salam rahmatullah. Actually, I had stepped away and just came back. So, alhamdulillah. But I just want to say, Abdullah, كيف حالك شيخ؟ كيف حالكم أخي؟ السلام عليكم.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, I'm doing good. How about
Nah,
yourself?
alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. You know I'm good, man. So, yeah, this topic is very much needed and appreciated. Me and you from the same area, so uh, we've seen some of this stuff from the going from the best of times when brothers were kind of balanced, and we seen the emergence. We know the people and the emergence of the Hulu and how it affected us. We both have the refutations against us and everything. So it's very sad, and there are brothers and who got so caught up in this gulu and so caught up in this refutation that and clearly that they have some type of mental health issues, that some of them have even left the deen altogether, not just left practicing Islam, not just left practicing the Sunnah, but actually left the deen. So it's really bad, Akhi. So addressing this and talking about it is very much needed, Akhi.
Jazakallah khairan, jazakallah khair.
Assalamu alaikum. Am I pronouncing this correct? Gokun? You have the mic.
Now, are you talking about specifically relating with the women or men? What is the connection to mental health? I mean, because I have just talked the mental health of the men, and I was curious because it's kind of an interchangeable subject.
Yes, I do. I do notice that you just came into the room. The actual room started at about 7. But the replays are on. So if you would like to go back and listen to the replay of the talk, you can do that. If you don't have a specific question, I don't know how to answer that. But if you just go back and listen to the replay once the room closed, then you'll get a better insight of what the topic was about.
Okay,
Inshallah.
I'm just gonna share my 2 cents.
Hold
Then I will retract
one
myself.
second.
I'm from Okay, may I? Okay, the thing is that I'm from uh, Turkey. I'm from Turkey, and it's Muslim. I'm sorry, I have you
I do apologize,
muted.
brother. If you don't, yes, I'm trying to say something. Can anyone hear me? Because I do
Yeah,
have
you're
a
coming
very
across.
Zahida, it sounds like your mic is
Can
messed
you
up a
hear
little
me?
bit.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah, you're coming across a little broken, Zahida. Try it again.
yeah. Uh, can you hear me
Okay.
correctly?
Brother, I'm I'm sorry. Yes, I can hear you. But what we want is if you have any questions specific to the topic that was talked about. But since you came into the room late, I'm not sure what your question would be. We're not taking any other lectures from anybody on the stage. Brother Abdullah Ansari gave this lecture. So if you don't have a specific question, we're gonna ask you if you just go back to the audience with all due respect, inshallah.
Okay,
Um,
thank you.
you're welcome.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay. There is a question in the back channel if I can address it. It says, Assalamu alaikum. Does he have plans to cover solutions? My question would be, are there suggestions for how do we operate when we are under the leadership of such people and it affects the programs offered to the community participants?
Like, absolutely, we want to address the solutions because talking about the problem and just leaving it there, um, that just kind of leaves people. Um, it just kind of leaves people hanging, basically, and we definitely don't want to do that. And the reason why I didn't do that today is simply because of time. And so, what we can do, if the group wants to, is we can continue this at least for one more session. And in that coming session, we can talk about the other side. Because remember, we said we wanted to look at it from two perspectives. One perspective was the link to mental health as it relates to the abuse itself and how this abuse affects the mental health of those who've been victimized. And we didn't get to touch on that. And as well, we want to deal with some solutions. What we can do from a practical standpoint when we are in communities where we are victims of abuse, how can we manage within those communities if that's the best course is to stay put, or how can we look for alternative solutions elsewhere if that becomes the best course. And so we definitely want to look at that. And as I said, if it just appears that the consensus of, yeah, we want to talk more about this, as it was the last time, there were people saying we need more conversations along this lines. And I personally, as I said last time, this was therapeutic for me. I needed this as therapy for myself. And I even told the group, I said, hey, I'm being selfish this time. Generally, I try to find topics I think that the audience will benefit from. And in this case, this is something I felt I would benefit from. Turned out we all benefited from it. We're back again talking about it now. And if the consensus is that, hey, let's take this to the end, take it to the end of the line, and let's talk about the solutions, I'm definitely down for that.
Now, alhamdulillah, so we do have some comments in the back channel stating that they would like for it to continue. So inshallah, we would just go from there, plan it. Are we going to do this every first Tuesday of the month or just get into the scheduling, inshallah? Every Tuesday. For Tuesdays, I meant to say.
Um,
I think it's a great idea.
I mean, it's important, you know. There's a lot of things that go on in Muslim communities, and most times you don't see any healthcare advocates along that line in that profession. You know, sometimes it's
I
something
found
it's needed as well. I know we have a sister here in the group who has that profession, Sister Rukaya. Um, I'm not sure if she's a advocate or whatever, but definitely, if you have a few words and would like to come up, it'll be good. Inshallah ta'ala.
Afwan, I have
Um,
a couple questions related to the topic for Abdullah. The first one, for the person who is being victimized or feels that they're being victimized by people in the community or someone in the community that's like that's exhibiting this behavior that you're talking about, like this the ghulu and the refutations. You know, the person, maybe they stop giving the person salam. Maybe, you know, they frown every time the person comes around. You know, when the person comes, they're, you know, they're turning their back on them. You know, if it's a sister, they're not even, you know, giving her salam. They, you know, looking at her strange. For the person who's experiencing this, what are some advices you can give them that for them to deal with, you know, this, to practically deal with this? Because what happens a lot of times, this person, you know, stops coming to the masjid, or they don't want to go to that particular masjid, or, you know, they feel a lot of apprehension whenever they see those people or that person. So what's some advices to give the victim in dealing with it? And the other question is, as far as like the people who, you find some people in their attempts to combat those people who are, you know, exhibiting these behaviors and these personality defects, that they start calling them names. And sometimes the many people from the general people start to confuse them with the people who are really trying to practice the Dawat Salafiyah. So now the Dawat Salafiyah has this horrible name, and somebody hears Salafi, they're like tucking tail and running, or they're just, you know, they get apprehensive right away. And then you have some people that, you know, they label everybody as, it's like, to say that you're a Salafi or that you're following the Salafi methodology now, it's become like it's a taint in the general Muslims. So how do we deal with this, where, you know, where, you know, for the people who, you know, look at anybody that says they're Salafi, or who stands up for the Sunnah, in a bad light?
طيب, so if we look at the second question first, and that is some of the slinging of pejoratives and the name calling, that kind of goes back and forth, which is a response to some of the negativity that's been initiated maybe by some of the extremists who call themselves Salafis. So basically, the one thing that we have to understand is it's critical for us to be very careful in Islam with name calling. And that if we engage in it and we're not justified in doing so, if we engage in it unjustifiably, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has issued a very strong warning against that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in Surah Al-Hujurat, He says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, O you who believe, لَا يَسْخَرْ قَوْمٌ مِّنْ قَوْمٍ عَسَىٰ إِن يَكُونُوا خَيْرًا مِّنْهُمْ. He says, do not let some people mock and ridicule others. It may be that those who are mocked are better than those who mock them. Then he repeats the same thing, but he mentions it for women specifically. Don't let some women mock other women. Perhaps those women who are being mocked are better than those who mock them. Then he says, وَلَا تَلْمِزُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. And do not insult one another. وَلَا تَنَابَزُوا بِالْأَلْقَابِ. And do not call each other by offensive nicknames. بِئْسَ الْاسْمُ الْفُسُوقُ بَعْدَ الْإِيمَانِ. How wretched it is, or wicked it is, for a person to be called by an offensive nickname after they have believed. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَتُبْ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الظَّالِمُونَ. And whoever does not repent, does not leave this behavior, abandon this behavior, they are from the wrongdoers. So that's a very strong statement from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, calling the people who do that wrongdoers. And one of the errors that people make, and they've made this error historically, is that they respond to extremism with equal and opposite extremism. That's not how we're supposed to operate. We are the moderate and balanced nation. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. We have, and likewise have we made you a justly balanced nation. We are the nation which avoids both extremes. Extreme negligence and liberalism, and extreme fanaticism and rigidity. we avoid both of those, and we follow what? We follow the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that guidance is, for the most part, except in exceptional cases, it's free of what? Of name calling. And it's free of what? Going to an equal and opposite extreme. And so that's the first thing. I would say also, we have to be, if we really believe in truth and promoting the truth and promoting a positive image of the truth, we have to be very careful about how our behavior will negatively affect the perception of others of the truth. And this is what you alluded to. We have to be very careful and cautious about that. How our behavior will affect how people perceive, and what we say about the truth and the people of truth will affect how people perceive truth and the people of truth. And then last but not least, forgetting the last point I wanted to mention, but I will say that it's also important before we speak to educate ourselves, because many people who speak on these topics are not educated. They're not really educated about what they're talking about, and it's clear from the things that they say. Their ignorance is apparent when they start saying these things, like some of these pejoratives that they use for people who ascribe or attribute themselves to the Salafi movement or the Salafi methodology. It's clear that they're ignorant, and they don't discriminate or differentiate between people who, for them, Salafi is a misnomer, and the people who are really practicing and following this methodology, this praiseworthy and blessed methodology. Last but not least, you had asked me a while back to talk about this separately, and I do have intentions to have a discussion somewhere down the road where we could talk about this whole mess and confusion that that centers around this term and this terminology of the way of the Salaf and as-Salafiyya and the Salafis. The second thing you asked was advice for victims to deal with. Obviously, I don't want to say everything that's on my mind, partly because we actually want to speak about this in more detail in the coming talk. But I will say that sometimes we are compelled, for our own sanity and for our own mental health, we are compelled to disassociate with certain people who relationships with them have become intolerably toxic and dysfunctional. You're forced. That you try as a Muslim to make it work with other Muslims, to get along with other Muslims. And the more you try, the more they expose you to their toxicity, the more they abuse you, the more they hurt you. And you get to a point where if you continue to associate with them, your sanity, your mental health, your emotional health, and other types of health will be negatively impacted. So it may be necessary, to go to a different mosque. It may be necessary not to put yourself in a position where you have to interact with those people. It's as sad as it is. If you're not able to win them over, or at least convince them to be civil and to behave with you and treat you and give you the rights that a Muslim is entitled to, then you may have to. That may have to be your course of action. But obviously, if it has not gotten to that point, then obviously the most obvious advice would be to advise them and to invite them to have rational, reasonable discussions about whatever issues are causing them to behave towards you in this way. And if they are objective people and they're open-minded people and seekers of truth, sincere seekers of truth, then they will be inclined, if you have the truth with you, if the truth is on your side, to accept that truth and to abandon the behavior that they've been exhibiting. So this is the best advice, or two advices I could give right now, and hopefully we'll have more in-depth and detailed advices generally, and for this case specifically, when we talk about solutions in the coming lecture, inshallah.
Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh. Nah, we need a series, man. You know how we do. We need a series, man.
Inshallah, we'll do our best, akhi. We'll do our best. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us al-ikhlas fil qawli wal amal. Give us sincerity in word and deed.
I mean,
I mean.
طيب,
All
are
right.
there any other go ahead, Zahid, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just getting ready to say we reached our hour, alhamdulillah. And it's just one other suggestion in the back channel. There's no other questions, and that suggestion would be about parental abuse towards adult children.
And,
And understand that it was a very limited lectures on that on here. So inshallah, that was another suggestion. Inshallah,
okay, let me go ahead and write that down, and we will try to speak to that in one of the coming sessions. Parental abuse of
towards
adult
children. Yes,
towards okay adult children, right?
yes, yes.
I also want to say to the group, we're always open to suggestions for topics that will have meaning for you in your life and in your development as a Muslim. And so, if there's just like this person just suggested this topic, if you have something in your mind that I would really like to hear about this, I would really like to hear somebody talk about this and talk about it in a way that a revert can appreciate. Talk about it in a way that is practically beneficial. It's not just a theoretical lecture we leave with, maybe a warm, fuzzy feeling and then that's the end of it. But no, something that gives us, useful tools, something to think about, something to reflect on, something that we can actually, sink our teeth into and apply in our lives. If there's a topic that you really, really are interested in hearing, then please let us know. You can reach Zahida. I think everybody probably has her contact or a way to get in contact with her. And Zahida can let me know, clue me in as to what topics are in the queue. And we will do our best to address them to the best of our ability. Again, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward all of you for coming tonight. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. May He bless your houses, bless your spouses, bless your children, bless what remains of your day, bless your evening, bless the rest of your week. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shower you with His blessings and surround you with His protection. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us better Muslims, better believers. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our lives